Hey everybody, it's John Pollock here alongside John Ramdeen and Robin Black, and the Nevada Athletic Commission held a number of hearings on Thursday, and we do have some finality to a number of big cases involving Brock Lesnar, Jon Jones, and Nate Diaz. Starting with Jon Jones, this was not a surprise because it had been reported last week that he had reached an agreement with the Nevada Athletic Commission. He would have a one-year suspension, the same that he got from USADA. So that is retroactive to last July with the drug test that took him out of his UFC 200 fight with Daniel Cormier, and is retroactive to July. So he will be able to fight next July. So for Jon Jones now, we at least do have a confirmed date of when he can return, and would be able to return in time for the UFC's annual July show.
Yeah, I mean, this is good for Jon Jones. It's good for the UFC because, you know, they're trying to build stars. They're trying to keep the stars that they have. They're trying to develop new stars. Jon Jones is a fighter people want to see, but you also have a dilemma in the 205-pound division. What do you do? Because right now it only seems like it's Daniel Cormier. You can maybe say Alexander Gustafsson, but it's Daniel Cormier and it's Anthony Rumble Johnson. That Jon Jones' return is still a number of months away. What are they going to do at the 205-pound division?
I think you have to do Cormier-Johnson once Cormier is healthy. I think it would be awful if somehow Anthony Johnson didn't get this title fight.
What happens if that's March and then Daniel Cormier remains the champion? Is he going to sit on
4 months? April, May, June, July.
Yeah, okay,
Get Jon Jones right up in there. You just hope, you know, Jones, life is a complex thing. We learn as we go. And he's got to add to that list, you know, no supplements of any kind to that list with no cocaine and no everything else. So, and if he can do that and really focus, it sucks for the man to have to wait that long to fight. But in that time, there's so much growth the guy can make, physical growth, mental growth, you know, growth as a person, better as a martial artist, change his habits and become. This is one of the best fighters we've ever seen, arguably the best, although that C is already rising while he's sitting out, but he can really become an even better fighter, come in here and really show us what the martial arts is about.
Now, because Jon Jones was removed from that Daniel Cormier fight, he didn't face any fine. That wasn't the case for Brock Lesnar, who did fail 2 tests, including his fight night test, and did fight Mark Hunt. That's since been switched to a no contest. He got dinged 10% of his $2.5 million purse. So that's $250,000 that Brock Lesnar will be writing off to the Nevada Athletic Commission. On top of that, he also gets a year. So I don't know if he necessarily will be coming back to the UFC. He's under contract with the WWE until early 2018, but he will be 40 when his contract is up with the WWE, and I definitely don't rule out the idea that the UFC, when they need big fights, Brock Lesnar is one of those guys that they may be knocking on his door again.
My question is, if Brock has decided, you know what, I was a UFC champion, I've done what I needed to do in the world of mixed martial arts, I've dominated the world of professional wrestling and combat sports, what happens if he decides, you know what, I'm never going back to mixed martial arts? Does he have to pay the $250,000?
I believe so, yeah.
Do they come after him?
But when we say 10% of his purse, we don't mean the pay-per-view points. There were rumors of $12 and $13 million that he ended up making in that show. You know, if you are paid, let's say just round it down to a little $10 million. You're paid $10 million to beat the crap out of a guy, probably well juiced up, at least he failed a test. Mark Hunt, a regular human being who's a high-level athlete, gets beaten up like crazy, and you make now, $9.75 million. I mean, it's just one of those things, but it sucks.
Yeah,
you know, it really sucks. Sucks for Mark Hunt, and it sucks for the royal we. You know, like, little kids grow up and look at things, and we're hoping that they learn, don't cheat, because if you cheat, you will not be rewarded for it. This dude was rewarded maybe $9.75 million, slap on the wrist, nobody cares. I mean,
but he's dealt with it. And look at the fight with Alistair Overeem. Was Alistair Overeem on horse meat when he smashed Brock Lesnar? I know. I understand this is the name of the game. Brock Lesnar is just so far behind the game. It's like sometimes we got to do what we got to do in order for us to make the $10 million. It may not be right, but it's right for him.
In those old days, there was that Wild West scenario, and you talk to any of these guys, they understood that if you were not considering medical and and hormonal ways with which to enhance yourself, you were at a detriment, and many of them fought anyways. And guys like Chris Weidman and Michael Bisping and many other clean athletes succeeded in that era. Now, there's no excuse. Now you have to go and figure out how to have a doctor on the very front lines of the technology, of the research, of how to trick these tests. Now you're just going, and it's not because you think Mark Hunt is on drugs. In the old days, that was the excuse. You're looking over there, and there's Wanderlei Silva in Japan, and you're like, I don't know, man. Maybe I should call a doctor. That's something we can all kind of understand. We think of that and we go, well, if I thought my guy was on it, what would I do to be able to, we can understand
what about
that
skill
idea.
level? We know that not everybody in the UFC is at that same level. There are some blue belts in the UFC. There's some black belt world champions. You go in there, for example, if you're CM Punk, you're facing Mickey Gall. The guy's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Things are lopsided.
You get beat up.
Yes, you get beat up. So if you're a guy, again, I'm just using Brock as an example. If you're like, well, you know what? The playing field isn't level. I don't have the experience.
But this is how this started.
Yeah, I know.
You're a brown belt and Pollock's a blue belt, so Pollock takes a lot of juice. So you go, well, I better take juice, and now we go back to skill again. It always goes back. You cut way more weight. Pollock cuts a ton of weight, so now you cut it. It goes back to skill. You're trying to keep your skill or natural attribute advantages, and anyone who's playing with the system is trying to overcome their disadvantages by cheating.
Which is what Brock is doing, because he spent so much time doing WWE stuff that he can't possibly...
Sure, we're discussing the why, but there's always a why to cheat. There's always a why to cheat. But, what do we teach? If we're deciding that we're going to, as a society, say whatever you got to do to win, do it, that's how we end up in this in the first place. That's why you bring in USADA to go in and try to prevent that. Because yes, the instinct will always be there. If you're a cab driver and somebody comes in and says, you take this one pill, it's illegal, but take it and you'll make 3 times as much money and you'll get 50 times as many fares, you'll take it. That is a human nature. That is why we put these things in there to stop that. Now it's there, and Mark Hunt has a concussion and all kinds of damage because Brock Lesnar was outside of it, and he ends up getting $250,000 fine, which would kill anyone at this desk and anyone in this room. But to Brock Lesnar, it's like, hey, I made out like a bandit.
We can also, I think, look in hindsight, and I mean, a lot of us said this at the time, that I think it was a fumble, the fact that Brock Lesnar did not have to go through that 4-month testing period just because he had retired pre-USADA. I think if he does come back, he would absolutely have to go through that, and I think the case should have been that he should have had to do that already, because this probably wouldn't have been an issue then.
Yeah.
You'd have to change the structure for that. That rule is in there so that if a regular athlete who had been retired decides to come out of retirement, we start testing you from now. That would be prohibitive for that athlete if he gets a phone call and says, in 8 weeks, we want you to fight. The reason that has been waived is that person could go, well, I haven't been training, but I want to get back, and give them that chance. You'd have to change that in the structure.
Final one is Nate Diaz, who just walks away with a $50,000 fine for his part in the water bottle, and there was an energy drink thrown with the press conference leading into the Conor McGregor-Nate Diaz fight. With Nate Diaz, I mean, he made a ton of money. His purse was $2 million for that fight at UFC 202, and I think it's going to be a while before we see Nate Diaz, and that's on Nate Diaz's choosing when he decides to come back.
Yeah, and he said it. He said, I'll be back for the 3rd Conor fight. He understands what this game is all about. He's been around Jake Shields, who fought George St. Pierre in front of 60,000 people. Gilbert Melendez has been in this game for so long, but his brother and his mentor, Nick Diaz, one of the biggest stars in the game, has dealt with everything. So
they've worked some significant. When you look at these early cards in 2017, those phones are going to be ringing for those two
100%.
brothers.
And I'll tell you, if you're Nate Diaz, you're like, I fought for 40,000, I fought for 60,000, then I fought this Irish guy, and I made 8 million, and then 12 million. I think I'm only fighting this Irish guy. Makes sense. And Nate Diaz and Nick Diaz have earned the right to do whatever the fuck those guys want to do. They've earned that through their body of work in leading mixed martial arts and in getting people excited, and those Diaz brothers deserve whatever. You shouldn't even have fined them. I mean, it's just a water bottle.
So to summarize, 1-year suspensions retroactive to last July for Jon Jones and Brock Lesnar, with Lesnar also getting a $250,000 fine. Nate Diaz, a $50,000 fine coming out of Thursday's Nevada Athletic Commission hearings.